My name is Jacob Palmer, and I'm a senior recruiter here at RepWorks, and have been here for 8 years now. So, in case you're not aware, we run all of the FCC events and also get involved in 13 other communities as well. So, London CTOs, the London Job community, aspiring women speakers, and aspiring women's principals as well. Despite all this community work, we are a tech recruitment company. So, we use our community links to add value and to basically help startups and established companies scale their teams. So we've helped clients like Expedia, Nutmeg, Skyscanner, Visa, ITV, and as I say, lots of different startups as well. We tend to find we get approached when you're struggling to find a particular engineering team, or it could be a particular skill set that you're struggling with, or basically you just haven't got the time to kind of sift through all of the applications and things like that. So yeah, if anyone is hiring at the moment, then give us a shout. Or if anyone does just want to get a state of the market at the moment, obviously we had an interesting year in 2023. So yeah, if anyone does just fancy a chat, then let me know. I'll drop my LinkedIn onto the chat. Feel free to approach me, and we can take things from there. But yeah, without further ado, I will hand you over to Alex for her product talk. So yeah, over to you, Alex.
Thank you. So I have to do a short intro notice. This workshop is actually something that I do in about like 8 hours. So it's kind of like a day-long workshop, but you're going to get an hour's version of that. I will give you the links to the slides, and also the link to one of the workbooks that I use when we go through the workshop that has like different exercises that you can go through for your services or your products. I will say, do not be intimidated, because it is kind of like a intermediate advanced type session. So basically it focuses on really complex marketing kind of like outlook. So it's not just like, how do you write a blog post and how do you do a social media campaign? It's kind of like, how do you think strategically about your marketing? What are the cycles that your product goes through, and like the marketing for it that kind of goes with it? How do you do a product release? How do you do like all of those things? So if you do have questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll get back to them at the end. And then we're going to do also some open Q&A at the end if you have like live questions that you want to ask, but I don't want you to like lose your questions while I go through stuff. So I see there's one. Oh, I think it's the LinkedIn message. All right. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can go through the content. Again, it will be, maybe some stuff will be a bit more advanced level for some of you that have maybe not been into product or product marketing. So if that is the case, please drop some questions in the chat and we can talk about them as we go through. So what we're going to talk about today is sectioned in about 4 parts. We're going to set the scene about what product marketing is, how it relates to other disciplines like UX and product management. We're going to then go through the process of designing a product marketing launch plan. And again, there's some resources in there that you're going to be able to access. We're then going to maybe take a short break like I do in my general workshop so we can do some questions. And then we're going to continue with continuous onboarding. So basically getting and onboarding new customers while you're nurturing your current customers, and then measuring what matters. And that relates to making sure that you're achieving your goals and you're embedding metrics and data into how you market and how you develop your products and services. I usually do this for a lot of product managers, and recently, kind of mid last year, someone said that they're getting rid of product managers at Airbnb. That is not the case. They're merging it with the product marketing type of role. So the product managers will now also be product marketing managers, and it's kind of a trend that we've seen taking off a little bit. So at some point, if you are a product manager or you're looking to move into product, you might actually be expected to know quite a bit about product marketing. So it's a good primer in case you ever want to pivot careers. So in terms of product marketing, content, and communications, what are these? Well, product managers usually have like a strategic role in how they develop a product, and they're actually responsible for the overall product success and also meeting the goals of the business in terms of that product. They do tend to work a lot with customers, but also internal teams. And depending on the type of product manager they could be like B2B, B2C, B2D, which is developer, which is my case. And then the product marketing manager has a slightly different role where they're more focused on the customer side and potentially in some cases the sales side. So providing that content and that collateral for the sales teams and customer success teams to actually be able to sell the product that you have or your business has. They also drive the go-to-market strategy, and that's basically when you're launching or relaunching or upgrading your product. How do you craft that messaging? How do you identify those audiences? How do you know who are the people who you should be talking to so you don't spend a lot of time just kind of like broadcasting stuff to people that will never really be interested or buy your product? They also shape your product branding and your product image, and they do consider kind of like what type of messaging works best for the personas that you have. So like the people that you're trying to actually get to be aware and use your product and continue to kind of like pay you and buy things from you. In terms of how this also works with the UX side, if you're looking at this as a business, a lot of larger enterprises will have a UX, a marketing, and a product management team. And sometimes these roles overlap. And this is kind of like a diagram of where they overlap. So the product manager and the marketing manager would often work with the UX in terms of research and design to kind of like draft your personas, do some wireframing for some new features or some new products that you're probably working on. They help you do customer research and customer like development, so understanding kind of like who your markets are, who your audiences are, and also like how to design really good user testing to validate your hypothesis or your experiments when you're developing your product, so you don't spend a lot of time building the wrong thing. In terms of some frameworks, the Product Marketing Alliance and Developer Marketing Alliance have some really good frameworks that explain what a product marketing person would do or a team would do, and equally a developer marketing person as well. So depending on who your target audience is, it does change slightly, depending on what your product is and who your audiences are. Now, this is where I generally do an exercise after introducing everyone into product marketing and what it is, what isn't, what other roles kind of like work with it. We kind of go through what it means to the people in the room. Obviously, we can go quickly and just kind of so I can get an idea about how many of you have done some marketing before or understand marketing. If you want to go ahead and kind of like just let me know in a couple of words what your type of experiences, just so I know like how much I need to explain like some of the base concepts or not. And equally, there's a workbook that you'll be able to view that has all of the like exercises in the workshop. And that's at that QR code or bit.ly/PMM jam. And you can check that out. Again, you can bookmark it, and if you need to go back to it when you're designing your own stuff, you can go. So, simplistic view of building awareness. All right. Anyone else? You can unmute yourself, or you can type it in the chat in terms of like what product marketing experience you've had so far, or how much you know about it.
Shall I go ahead?
Yeah, sure.
Right. I'm Martin Band, now independent consultant. I spent my closest experience to product marketing was when I worked for Oracle quite a while ago, 20 years ago, in fact, where I was a product director, and I had product marketing resources. Well, one or two people who led the product marketing on my particular product set. I got involved by doing the PR and being the talking head for various presentations and conferences and so on.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what I do. I do understand the processes of product marketing, but quite a while ago, and I'm interested in updating my skills.
Awesome. Thank you. Martin, anyone else want to go? I know Storm and Russell mentioned a little bit about what they want to do, so if there's anyone else who wants to
I have zero experience in marketing.
Well, you said operations, and I'm like, you want to learn, but maybe you don't have.
I do want to learn.
Yeah. Cool.
So
Richard?
I'll speak of this. So I am a marketeer. I'm a fractional CMO, and I work closely with sort of product teams, bringing products to launch and the like. So I'm really interested to find out what I've been doing wrong all these years.
I don't think you've been doing anything wrong. Maybe you haven't done everything you wanted to do.
No, that's true. That is true.
So Alex is a senior solutions architect. Very little product marketing experience as a co-founder, except as a co-founder in a startup, trying to identify the market for data engineering, getting data from where it's generated to where it's needed. Cool. That sounds really interesting. I know based on what I know about my teams that is a very, very big problem for most people. So I think you have a good market here for that issue.
I think there's a need, but I think one of the things I keep finding is that companies don't want to employ a whole person; they just want the problem solved. And I know lots of people who can do the work, so somehow I feel that there's a product there, some kind of service that will solve companies' problems. I'm just not sure about how to market it and how to specify it and things like that.
Yep. Cool. Right. So I have a good understanding of kind of like most of you and where you're at with the product marketing kind of like side of things. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the product development life cycle. This is not particularly to marketing. It's not just a marketing thing. It's a product thing. And usually it looks at, so for example, Alex wants to develop a new product, doesn't know how to kind of like go about doing this and then marketing this to the people who need it because he knows there's a need. So the first step would be to identify and validate the idea. So that's basically getting some research done, getting some customer interviews, getting some focus groups maybe done, understanding those people that want that problem solved. How is their experience right now and what can you do and where is your area where you can come and bring in a solution? And there is a book, The Lean Startup, who can teach you how to kind of like run these experiments and validate these hypotheses to get to where you can actually build a product that people want and want to pay for. And like an example is, for example, Dropbox. So before they actually went to build anything, they built a demo of a mock-up of how Dropbox would work. And it was like a few minutes video. And then they put in like, sign up to get on the wait list if you want this thing. Once they released it in like a day, they went from 5,000 signups they had at that time to 75,000 people on that wait list. And it just kept on increasing and increasing the more people shared it. So that's an inexpensive way to validate that what you want to build is really solving a need. And then kind of identifying your market, because those 75,000 people they got in that first day, once they started building out the prototype and they had like an MVP, they could actually go back to them and say, hey, can you test this out? And then out of that, you'd probably have, if you're really good at what you've built, and if it solves a real need, you'd probably be able to get like 10-15% easily from that captive audience to actually purchase your product post kind of like GA launch, for example, or, beta launch. So the second part is planning and prototyping. This is, again, where you're kind of like building something inexpensive to kind of try to validate your hypothesis and to do like your discovery for your product. You then go into the build phase, and this is usually once you've got enough information, data, customer kind of like insights, you actually go and start to build the minimum viable product or a minimum lovable product, which is a little bit more than an MVP. But it's literally something that your customers will rave about. They'll share it. You're going to have like organic marketing and growth. And after that, once you've gone through a couple of these cycles and you're kind of like ready and you have everything done, you're going to go to like your launch and assess. And this is where marketing is going to be even more important, because this is when you have like a shiny product packaged, ready to be sold. 2 people. Obviously, you should involve marketing in the earlier stages too, but really, if you don't have a dedicated person, at least, you know, like a month or 2 before your launch, make sure that you've involved them or you've planned yourself for your release plan and your go-to-market strategy. So when you do launch, you have like a really well polished, really well thought out marketing strategy for that. Once you've done that, it doesn't stop there. You just keep on going and you improve it and you repeat it, unfortunately, or fortunately. So again, I'm going to run through this part a little bit quicker because this is literally going through each of the stages with the people like in the workshop, and usually kind of like start thinking about your release, your reverse press release that you should be doing before you actually start designing your product. There is also a template in here. So if you do have a product, the best thing you could do if you're thinking about how you can monetize or like build and sell your product is to write a reverse press release and think really hard about your customers, your value, your solution, the problems you're solving, and what you'd want your customers to say about your product once it's done. I know it sounds silly, but it does help you focus, and it does help you kind of like identify the critical things you need to build for your MVP and MLP. And it also helps you kind of like stay within scope once you're starting to build and kind of like evolve your product, because you go back to kind of like your core goals and your core solution. There's another link here for you, and this is like a template for a product launch checklist. So if you're looking to like launch a new product or relaunch a product, this is really helpful in understanding kind of like what you need to do to get there. Again, this is not exhaustive, and it's also not, you have to do every single part of this depending on your product, your audience. If you do have like a pipeline of folks that you might be able to market to already, depending on where you're at in your building stage, you know, you might have more or less some of these things already, or you might have to think about building these things. But again, like if you go to that bit.ly link, you can just grab this and you can edit it and like change it around depending on how you want to build your product or where you're at in your journey. The launch, again, there are 3 phases to a launch: the pre-launch, the launch, and the post-launch. These are like, again, a couple of steps that you should be taking in those different phases. And again, depending on how many people you have working on this, if it's just yourself, how much time you have, like your timeline for when you want to launch. These things might take a week, 2 weeks, 2 months. So it does depend on your bandwidth and like the actual amount of work you need to do for it. I do recommend the postmortem for most things, including launches. So if you have other people that have been helping you with the launch, make sure that you're actually involving them in the postmortem. And you should be doing this internally within the people you worked with on the launch, but also externally with your customers to understand what could have gone better. Did they actually get what you were trying to communicate to them? And in the next iteration, like what kind of things are you going to do? Because you're going to keep on launching new things like new features, upgrades, updates to your product. So make sure that the next time you've learned from your experience, you've seen what works best, and you're actually documenting and implementing that in the next part. Here are a couple of example questions. So if you don't know how to do a postmortem, these can get you started with like what kind of questions you might want to ask from your team in terms of marketing and communications for your launch. So again, if you're stuck, you can start from here and then just make your own or tweak them, update them, add more, remove some. There's also a very sad part of a product, and that is sunsetting it. And it hurts, but at the same time, it will save you a lot of headaches in the future. The reasons why we sunset products or we decommission products are various, like we ran out of money, the product isn't needed anymore, there's a better product out there eating your market share, you don't have time for it, et cetera, et cetera. So like There are a lot of different reasons why you might do this, but you should also consider when it's time to do this to save you extra kind of like loss and headaches down the line. This is another exercise. What if it was your product? So if your product didn't exist, what would your customers miss? How would you do an offboarding for all the customers you have? How would you provide an alternative if there isn't an alternative, and so on? And the first question will actually also help you in combination with the press release to really think about what are the key selling points for your product. So if you weren't there, what would they miss? And what would they not have? And how is your product different and unique compared to other things in the market right now? All right. Designing a product marketing launch plan. I will take a 1-minute break to have some water. Do you have any questions on the previous section? Nope. Right?
Sorry, Alex, I've got a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
You gave us a link to a workbook. How useful is that? Because I need to, I tried to view it and it said it needs you to give me permission.
Really? I thought it was still
On
open.
Figma.
Oh, sorry. I'll show it to you.
I can do it later. It's just.
No, that's all right. I can just put another link to it. I think I need to start this open session and then it's not letting me do it.
It worked for me.
Oh.
Oh, it's just me then.
Sorry.
Computer, Alex.
Okay. Maybe you need to refresh it or do it in like a incognito window just in case, but we can definitely go back to it.
Thanks very much.
Just a quick question from me, Alex, on the content. I love the idea of writing a press release to kind of organize your thoughts. What's a reverse press release?
So it's something that Amazon does. If you Google AWS reverse press release,
okay,
you should probably get a template of how they structure it as well. So it's basically kind of like asking the questions before you start building. Sorry, Russell, I just saw your message. No worries. I think they're recording this, so if you need anything, you can come back to the recording. So it's basically before you start, it's kind of like the lean startup hypothesis experiment model. So before you start building, you're actually writing down, this is what I want my product to be, and this is how it solves customer problems. So when you're doing that, you can then share it with people and be like, you know, if this product existed, would you buy it? And how much would you pay for it? And what would be the best thing for you? So it's kind of like a mock-up, but it's like a mental mock-up of what it could be, which then helps you also like narrow down the problem you're solving, what's your solution going to be like, and down the line, you have like a very clear understanding. And especially if you're in a team, your team would also have a very clear understanding of like what they're building, what you're working towards. So it's kind of like it's basically a tool, one, to help you focus your mind on what it actually is that you're selling, and two, have a shared understanding and something to validate with people before you actually put any time, effort, money, people into like building it.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Cool. And this slide, I kind of hate it because I don't want people to think that product marketing is hard, but it is hard. As in like, it doesn't really happen overnight. Or if it does, it's like, you know, like 1 in a million that you've done nothing really. And like, it's your whole marketing campaign has blown up. But usually it takes a lot more time to get it right. And again, this is a bit about talking versus communicating and how people used to talk, or they still do talk, but they're not really saying something of value. And in marketing, it's really important that when you're saying stuff, you're not just saying them, but you're communicating the value to people. So there are some examples here in terms of like, you know, like user feedback. You're reviewing your feedback and your kind of like summary is some people don't like our new features. Well, sure. But the important thing is like, why did you do that feature? What do they like about it? And what can we do so they do like it, or they, you know, like, we don't do the same mistake next time. Is there anyone you can help to like improve that part? So then the customers aren't unhappy about it. You've just spent a lot of time developing this and now it's like, it's useless. So again, when you're communicating launches, updates, product information, you need to make sure that that's what you're doing. You're not just talking and saying stuff. You're actually kind of like drilling down to the core of the problem and the solution, so people understand like what's in it for them and why they'd like to take action, basically. So that's also related to the next part, which is problem, solution, feature, benefits mapping. And there's a matrix that you can create. Obviously, you should do this for your own products and your features. And this is kind of like an addition to your reverse press release, where you're really, really, really focusing just on like the problems, the solutions, the benefits, and how the features you're going to build solve those problems for people. So next part, impact mapping. Why are we doing this? Who are going to be the people we're doing this for? How are we like kind of like linking this to the business goals that we have? And what are the things that you're going to need to actually put this plan into action? And this is kind of like an example for a content kind of like release or a product, and what your goals are for that feature that you're releasing, and how you're going to like do that, and what are the deliverables you need to do it. Launch plan. These are all in the Figma file. And again, it's not like a easy thing to do. It's kind of a lengthy part that you'll need to spend some time really, really, really thinking about this. And the next part is continuous onboarding. Right, I'm going to take a short break. Any questions?
Yeah, I was just curious, Alex. It feels like so you mentioned there about like I think on one of the previous slides, it's like a product within a product, right? It's or like it was talking about adoption, or adoptions of like a certain feature. What scale of product are we talking about here? Is it applicable to things where your audience is potentially a lot smaller?
It can be. So let's take, for example, a person's a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
Their main product is consultancy. Mm-hmm. But some of the features or like sub-products of their main product are maybe doing workshops, maybe doing coaching, maybe coming in and doing the work for you, like part of your team. Maybe being a fractional consultant. So they come in when you need them, but they're not like a permanent feature in your organization. Maybe they do like courses, like online courses. Maybe they do content. So all of those things in this case could be considered a feature of your product, because your main product is you basically as a consultant. But then everything that you offer, like your product offering, can be considered a feature of your consultancy business. Obviously, you could then have things like you hire other people to work for you that are part now of your consultancy business. So that kind of like evolves and changes. But if people really just want you, you need to consider, if you're expanding your business model, is that going to be as effective? Because if they're expecting to get you and they get someone else, will that actually be the same? And will your solution to their problem change? And therefore, the benefits you're providing aren't there anymore because it's not you. Or how do you convince them that the quality of the person you've hired is the same as your quality of delivery of your services? So features, I think you should look at features as things that make the product the product. The product can exist without all of the features that you have, and just kind of like the minimum viable ones. So if you're a consultant, you have to consult. But you don't have to make courses. You don't have to do workshops. You don't have to write blogs. Obviously, all of these build your brand and your profile, but they're not the core offering of your product. They're kind of like additional features that make it better and more successful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it. And you would test, and you're essentially testing these things out to see if it's a feature worth doing, but nobody wants your courses. You're like, okay, maybe that's not what I should put my efforts into, for example.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Alex, what do you think of basing that last slide or the approach to product marketing on the value proposition, where you say, you talk about our customers have this kind of problem, this broadly speaking is what the solution is, these are the essential things of the solution, and here are the benefits of those, and the essential things of the solution are more about what it allows you to do than what it is, at least in the software world. And the last bit is, why would you buy it from us instead of our competitors or alternatives?
Yes.
I find that very useful. It encapsulates everything we want to put in the offer to the customer.
I think honestly, the best products are the ones that can make very clear what their value proposition is. And usually if your value proposition is so good, you kind of don't really need to market it as hard. So the more you don't mention the value proposition and the benefit to your customer and why your solution is the best, the more marketing you have to do, because people don't actually understand what it is they're getting. If you have something that's like incredible and you know what its value to people is, like that value is what's gonna sell it. It's basically, it sells kind of itself, but you still need to do like the collateral and like surfacing that to the right people. But you don't have to work as hard as like at identifying the messaging and kind of like building your kind of like messaging framework for what you're going to communicate, because you're like super clear, like these 3 things are what this is good for and the value you're getting. And if I just lead with that, I don't really need a lot of fluff around it because it's awesome. And that's why, again, like demos work so well, because if you can show something in like 30 minutes that convinces that person, I need to have this, that's it. Like they just want to know, where can I go to find out how much it costs and how do I buy it? Like it doesn't really need a lot of selling, because that thing has just convinced them this is what I want. So I think it's like, it's similar to when, for example, like mobile phones came out. Like people didn't really care about the brand and anything, because like the thing in itself, being able to take the phone with you, it was like, this is amazing. Like I now know I have a portable phone. I don't really care the brand, the color, the whatever. Like this is already such a big improvement to what we had before. I just know that I want to know if I can afford it, and then I'll buy it. Like that's it. So yeah, totally agree. Like if you lead with your value prop and like the main key points of like, this is why customers, not you, like customers actually want to buy this. That's like sufficient for your product to lead on with like that in their marketing. And again, like you need to make sure on your website, on your like LinkedIn, on your posts, that is like what you lead with, and it's super clear, and like you talk to customers or potential customers to be like, okay, what would you do the first time? What would you do the second time? And is it painful to buy this product? Because after the marketing, the worst like thing you could do is make it super difficult for them to understand how much it costs and to go ahead and buy it. Like no matter how good your marketing is, if it takes me half an hour to go through the checkout, I'm just going to give up and go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. I just think that if you can articulate, and it's not easy to articulate a value proposition. I've been in weekend long meetings articulating value propositions, but if you can, then it drives everything else. It drives the sales messages, it drives what you say at conferences, it drives what you put on your website, it drives the sales training, because if the messages are right, those are exactly the messages you want the sales force, if you've got one, to be articulating to major customers. For me, that step, it covers much more than product marketing, but it's if you can do that,
Obviously, yeah.
makes it
But it
much
makes
easier.
our job much easier.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to talk a little bit about continuous onboarding. So I think a lot of people forget once they've done their product launch, they kind of like forget that they need to keep on doing the launch to some extent, because that's how you kind of like get new customers, but also not all of your customers will be with you from the beginning. So you need to make sure that you have an onboarding loop that you can leverage for those people that come in after your kind of like initial launch campaign, basically. And I think like that's another thing that I've noticed with people. It's like, oh, we've done this big campaign last year. And it's like, but what are you doing now? Like if someone just discovered your product and they came to buy it, do they have the same experience, the same information, and the same kind of like pleasure in buying your product again? Or was it just for the people who just got the first memo and like the rest of them is kind of like, well, it's a bit clunky and it doesn't really work. So again, like I think like these two diagrams are super important because they emphasize the fact that once you've launched, you have to keep on going, because your current customers and your potential new customers won't just kind of like happen by themselves. You need to make sure that you have the mechanisms in place, and whether that's automation to make sure, you know, like if someone requests a quote from you, they get an email and then they get a quote, or if it's something like, you know, like here's a free 4-page PDF with some stuff that you really want, and then you have an automation in place where they want to maybe book a call so you can get some details from them before that happens, or you have a Calendly where they can go and schedule, you know, like an appointment and pay for it. Whatever that is, you just need to make sure that those mechanisms are in place so you're not losing business just because you've only thought about the one and done launch part and not the continuous one. Also, on the second diagram, you will notice there is a tertiary onboarding, and that is basically when your current customers rave so much about you that other people want to become your customer. And you shouldn't underestimate that, because people trust people more than they do systems. So no matter how good your website is, if I have someone coming telling me, hey, I know you have this problem and I found a solution that worked great for me, I will probably not 100%, but 90% of the time go on what they say. But then if I also check out your website and all your presences and your branding and your product and it looks amazing, that's like 100% I'm sold. Because one, I got like a testimonial from someone I trust. And two, that content you have in your presence has just validated my assumption based on that trust. So you've got me as a customer. Now you just need to prove to me that, you know, my friend that recommended you and myself have made the good decision of investing in you. These are again some exercises on continuous onboarding, inside and outside continuous onboarding. So this is about like people that have not yet become your customer and people that have become your customer, and how do you onboard them to new things you release. So let's say you release a workshop as the previous person that's a consultant. You want to make sure that your current customers also are aware of your offering, because they might actually want to purchase it because you already have a relationship and they trust you, and they might want to, you know, like it's kind of like cross-selling basically what you already have. Additionally, there might be people that didn't use you before because you didn't have workshops and that's what they were looking for. So you need to make sure that you're also marketing to them, so they know that this offering is now available, and you can do it. Onboarding practices, we have some different examples over here. In terms of content, sales and support, product design, product education, product marketing. So like these are things that you can use in your onboarding cycle to kind of like enhance their experience and how they go through it. And the last part is about metrics and measurements. And before we go on, I will take another 1-minute break for questions. Any questions on onboarding? Nope. Okay. So success metrics can evolve. maybe your initial metrics were to perform an action. However, once you've established your product and you have a lot of customers, you might see that some of them are leaving or they're not as active. So maybe your metric is then going to change from I want to have 1 million users to I actually want to retain at least 500,000 users. And then you might go back and be like, actually, I want them to perform some key actions, which make me know that they are an active recurrent user. And you want to make sure that the core kind of like features of your product actually are those actions that those people take. And basically, there is the other side of metrics and data as we know it, and that's called vanity metrics. So again, because they evolve, and because maybe you start at the beginning with like, I want 1 million users, that is great, but the 1 million users won't make you money. So you need to make sure that the metrics that you're crafting and selecting are actually metrics that demonstrate the health and the usefulness and the return on investment of your product. So you want to make sure that they're actionable metrics, and you want to make sure that they're customized to your product and to your goals that you have for your product. And again, like if something seems to be too good to be true, make sure that you're looking into it. So like, again, if you're using like number of users as your metric to quantify success, maybe look into returning users after a week, after a month. Maybe look into, you know, how many of them actually go forward and make a purchase. Because just looking at it and being like, oh, great, I have 1 million users that have accessed my page. Right. And how many of them have actually bought something? There's also something called the R or pirate metrics. And these kind of like go from bottom to top. And they go through things like, you know, like acquisition, how do people find your product? Activation, like where is their aha moment? When do they actually get to the benefit of your product? The sooner the better. Do they keep using your product after a week, a month, a year? How do you make money? So how do your customers pay for your services or products? And do they actually then become your champion and kind of like your advocate and convince other people of the benefit of your product? There's also another metric that's not in there that talks about engagement. And that's where the heart metrics come in. And this basically takes like not just the data on like your acquisition and your retention and your referrals, it looks at it as a holistic kind of like metric. So like how do they interact and experience it, considering all of the other kind of like things that circle around it. So the heart framework is something that Google uses, and it basically looks at things like happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success. To put that in practice, you kind of like look at goals, signals, and metrics. So the goals is what you want customers to do or you expect them to do with your product. The signal is the action that they take that would lead them to achieve that goal. And then the metric is like the specific measurement that you're going to use to validate if they've achieved that goal or not. In terms of the heart framework, there are like 5 different categories that you can look at. And those are like happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success. You won't have goals for all of them, or you could, but not all products need to have goals for all of them. Ideally, you should focus on some of them to start with, maybe add some more as you go through, because it is challenging when you're starting out to actually try to monitor everything and improve everything and do everything at the same time. But I would say if there's something you should look at to start with, like the past success and the happiness are 2 really good ones, because the task success means that they're doing what you're expecting them to do and what your product's built for. And from there, you can actually start building out the rest of the things. So like your adoption, your retention, your engagement, your kind of like advocacy from them. So how to start with the heart? Make sure you set your goals for your customer experience. check progress signals, and then identify the metrics that you want to track. And again, if you're in a company and you're trying to kind of like showcase product marketing, return on investment, you probably need to do a couple of things because people usually don't understand how important marketing is. So you have to build credibility and trust. You have to make sure that the teams actually understand what you're doing, how you're helping them. Your leadership understands the same. You need to demonstrate some sort of success at a small scale, and then show how you're going to be able to scale that up to increase that success. And make sure that you actually have some data and measurements around, meaningful data and measurements around how product marketing has helped the product. And I usually do a retro in terms of like how the workshop went. But there is a survey if you want to fill it in. That would be cool. And I'm just going to drop a load of links so you can get the slides and everything else. Give me 1 second.
While you're doing that, I just wanted to reiterate your point about getting the right metrics. I kind of, it's sometimes a real challenge to sell that into the business when I'm doing that in a consultancy role, because it's really easy to think about users and customers and stuff like that. And I'm of the view that if the metrics that you're following are really obvious and really easy, then they're probably the wrong ones. You've got to think really hard about what you're measuring.
I totally agree. Like it's so easy to just go and be like, well, like this metric looks really good. I think we should use this because it demonstrates like our success. So I think like it's it's really funny like how people, I mean, obviously everyone wants to be like, well, what I'm doing is super important and it's great and it works perfectly. But it's like, but going back to that reverse press release, what did you set out to do? And based on those goals and your solution and your like value proposition, how are you measuring against those to make sure that you're achieving what you set out to do? But I think obviously, to continue receiving trust, investment, and, like building those relationships, people want to see success early. But the reality is you need to kind of like temper that and say, hey, listen, this is going to evolve. Here's a few shiny metrics that you'll probably be impressed with. But against our original goals and metrics, like here's how we actually perform. We predict this is going to only get better based on what we know so far. But it's better to be honest and transparent about that, because somewhere down the line, someone's going to look into that data and those metrics, and they're going to be like, but wait, this wasn't what we were trying to do. So why are you showing me this data? And it's way worse because that's just going to break down all the trust and the fact that you've kind of like dug yourself into a hole. And again, that sunsetting part, how can you have a sunsetting conversation with someone when your metrics say you're doing fantastically well? Like, how can you tell them, I think we should probably get rid of this gradually because of this, when all you've done is show them great metrics, and then you're kind of like swapping those to be like, actually, it's not going as well as we kind of told you it is. So I think I think you need to maybe be a bit more upfront with them and say, listen, if you want to really understand if this is working or not, let's do proper like measurements and metrics validation. If you just want to justify your existence, we can do that too, but you need to understand the risk down the line is that someone's going to call you out on it. And it's their decision if they want to listen to you or not. I mean, it's their money at the end of the day, but I think you want to spend your money well. You don't want to spend your money on a lie.
Yeah. There is also kind of like a death by dashboards, right? If we can measure it, we can build a dashboard for it, and we can have pages and pages of this stuff.
But I think like this is the thing, right? I don't know how many of you have heard of like North Star metrics, but you should have a one metric that defines your product, that gives you a high level, is it going well or not? And then after that, you have like tiers of metrics that kind of feed into that one metric to give you a more like full picture of what is actually happening in there. But there should be one measurement that you can look at, and your main dashboard page, that's the big first box. And it tells you, this week, is it better or worse than last week? Now, the reasons why it's better or worse are probably going to have to be, additional kind of like dashboard rows where you can look at some very specific things like your primary actions that you want your customers to take, new user onboarding, returning users, like maybe like those are like the underlining rows that feed into that one metric. But you should be able to identify one thing that tells you, is my product doing well or not? And then you can dig into the like, well, why is it or why isn't it?
Yeah, I found that a really powerful thing to use, North Star metric, and it's one of those things that you can get people to question everything they do by sort of saying, how does that affect the North Star metric? What the activity that you're about to undertake, how does that affect the North Star metric? Because if it doesn't, do you really want to do it?
Yeah. Like, is it worth the investment? And again, they're all like tied together. Your reverse press release, your goals, your like value proposition, your North Star metric, your like, they're all interconnected. But I think with big companies, it's even harder to show that, because like people are like, oh wait, but I don't talk to that team. And for us to know about this, we need to talk to that team. So I think like for smaller businesses and for like, like startups, it's way easier because everyone's like really close together. So and you can kind of like work and impact those things and understand them. But like for big companies, it's such a big problem because it's just the scale makes it super difficult unless you're super intentional in like how you do that and how you change that. Oh, right. We have 4 minutes left.
I had a question, Alex. How do we so with this feels like this applies probably more heavily for like larger corporations or like a larger product. How do we, if you were to just kind of like go, okay, to shrink this process down, because I'm looking at the product launch release checklist, right, which is very comprehensive and very useful. But as you say, if you're like a one-man band, a consultant, a fractional consultant, you're looking to kind of test out little different things. This looks like a lot of like upfront investment of time. And when you're dealing with you're probably dealing in numbers of, we're not talking millions, we're not talking half millions, we're talking in the 10s and 20s of like a feedback loop. How can we iterate fast and using this same process, but kind of like, which bits would we chunk?
I think so. If you look at like the launch checklist, it has a lot of stuff in there. I would say like keep just the things that align to what you're trying to do. So like first, write your reverse press release. What is it that you're actually doing? What are you trying to achieve? And why would your customers choose you? Second, look at the release checklist and basically like just cut out anything that doesn't align to that press release and those goals. Like if you don't need to do a demo video, don't do it. If you have a working prototype, you can just link into your site, just link to that. If you have like, like an intro 5-page PDF of one of your most valuable things that you do, maybe it's like a workshop, maybe it's a white paper, maybe it's whatever, make that available on the site. And you've kind of like ticked off 3 of the things that you need to do to demonstrate value to people. So I would say like, that is like the big scale. You're literally building a product with maybe like, I don't know, 50 people on your team. So you have to do like all of these things. But if it's just you, just think about, okay, who are the people I'm trying to get to? What are my minimum viable actions that I need to do to get this out there? Like, do I need to just join some LinkedIn groups and start promoting my work? Do I need to go and figure out who I could go and like do a session with so I can get some customers interested? Do I need to go to some conferences to get people to know me and what I do? Can I reuse some of my conference materials to create some content on my personal website so people can like pay for it to get value? Like maybe you want to set up a Gumroad shop or something, and then kind of like promote that on LinkedIn and like, I don't know, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Like, I think it's more about, first you need to identify what it is you want to sell. Why would people buy it? And where are those people? And after that, you can figure out like, okay, I need to go and do this, this, and this from that checklist to achieve what I want and test my first product, basically. And again, think about that Dropbox example. They had nothing. And they just kind of like put out a video out there showing what it could be and be like, would you want to buy this? And overnight they had like 75,000 people say like, heck yeah. So think about what you could do at the smallest scale to show value to people, and then ask them, do you want to pay $10 for this? And if they say yeah, then it's like, awesome, build it, sell it. And those same people that signed up and said, yeah, they would pay for it, tell them. And then, you know, if 10% of those 75,000 actually give you $10, that's $75,000. So
that's a very helpful framing, actually.
Stone,
I think sometimes we get in the way of ourselves. Like we just think so much about stuff instead of just being like, you know, just go and test it out, see what happens. What could it happen? It fails, but if you don't test it out, what if it succeeds? Yeah, Richard, sorry.
I was just going to say, I've just been through some of this process myself throughout January, sort of working quite hard on my proposition and how I get to market and stuff like that. And I tell you, it's a lot easier to do this for a company than it is for yourself. As a marketeer, marketing yourself is really tough. And so, you know, as a non-marketeer, marketing yourself is tough as well. I think one of the things my only bit of advice really to give in this is to try and extract yourself from this and think about you as a product, as a company, as a business, and not as a person when you're going through that. It's tough, but.
And is that to help you think, like, is that to help think about it, or is it also just kind of like to remove like the emotion side of it?
It helps in removing some of the emotional stuff, I think, but it's one of those things that I've been doing this sort of fractional stuff for about 9 months now, and everything that I've sold so far has come through my direct network. But I know that that's going to run out, right? And I need to start going through. So people are buying me because they know me. The next group of customers are not going to be buying me because they know me. They're going to get to know me, but I've got to get in front of them first. And so I've got to stop thinking about using my personal relationship with people to do that, and actually, what is it that my target market really needs, and yeah. how can I reach them with that?
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
And also, you need to remember that most humans suck at self-promotion. And sometimes you have to like break that barrier by removing yourself from the equation. Because no matter like, even people who do this for a living, once you tell them like, give me a 1-minute elevator pitch for yourself, they're like blank. Because they're like, oh my God, like I'm not that interesting. Like, what would people want to know? Like, why me? What? So like in your head, they just all these things going on. So you should just be like, do you know what? I'm just going to look at it as either someone else's, or like this is an agency, and like it's not me, it's an agency, and kind of like just frame that in your head, so you like think about it from kind of like an external work perspective. You're not thinking about it as, I don't want to do this because it's me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, unless you're super good with self-promotion and you have absolutely no issue with doing that for yourself. But yeah. Anyway, I will let y'all go. I know we're a couple of minutes over time, but thank you so much. I did have one question before you go. So this is my first time interacting with the fractional community. And the reason why I wanted to do this was because I wanted to understand like would people pay for this? So like if you work for a company, would you pay for a 1-day workshop to like do all of this for your product or like for your team? Because I don't actually know. Like I've done this for internal teams and I've done this for conferences, but I've never looked at it as like a monetizing activity. And I was just like, you know what? I just want to go and give it a go and see if people would actually pay for this for their company.
I've just come out of a sort of a 6-month engagement with the SaaS business, but there is I may well go back into that one later on, and actually this is something very much that they would benefit from.
Okay, cool. So there is a market.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think there's a market for this kind of thing. I tend to go in and, as part of my product management work, say there may be no serious product marketing, where your product marketing messages are at odds with what you're saying on the website, or whatever I'd rarely go in and say you need to tune up your product marketing, full stop. It's because there's something wrong. And that thing that's wrong may be that looking at the website, it's just actually very badly written, and there's quite a few of them that are. The messages are right, but the US sucks, to use your term. So it possibly depends on the problem, whether I'd recommend a service like this to a client.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. That was all I needed. It's like to understand like what would people actually want. And thank you, Alex, as well. Yeah, I know that like for smaller companies, I think it's really hard for them to actually like invest in something like this. But obviously for like a bigger company where they're already established, it would probably be something that they would need to fix if they're not doing it well. So potentially, you know, I could lead with, I've seen your website and it sucks. Do you want to do this?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just kind of like some validation that this would be useful to other people like as well, because I do it anyway currently. So I was just interested if other people would be.
If I could just add very quickly to what I wrote, I think the thing that would tip me over the edge would be if, say, you were focusing on, say, smaller companies, say the 2 to 10 techie companies that are, you know, that lack this sort of experience. So if you specialize the day towards that sort of company, then that would be a lot easier sell and more convincing for me. And likewise, I don't know what other industries, you know, just aiming for larger firms or existing product marketing teams that have got problems. I don't know. Sorry, this may be blindingly obvious, but
no, I'm writing this down so I don't forget.
Yep. I think for me, it's all new. It's all new. There's loads of little things, you know. There's people who teach you how to do newsletters. There's people who teach you how to do websites and LinkedIn marketing and stuff like that. But it's unless it's related to the product and actually getting what people need and what they're willing to pay for, that's like almost wasted time. But yep, I'm rambling. We've gone past.
That's okay. But I've taken notes of all of that. Thank you very much. And yeah, if you also want to do the survey, I would really appreciate it if you have any other thoughts of like what would have helped you. And if I do get other resources, I'm happy to send them over to you. Like if I make some new stuff, if it's going to help you. So like if you let me know either on LinkedIn or in the survey, like what kind of stuff you're looking for, I'm happy to send you any of the resources that I've made in the past as well.
Sorry, the survey was the last bit.ly link, the PMMUX DX survey. Yeah. That was the survey. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And if you need to refer back, you have the links. And I think the team's going to post the recording. So if you need to share it with anyone or you want to share the links, feel free. And yeah, thank you so much. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Happy to stay in touch.
Thank you, Alex. That was really
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alex.
We'll see you soon.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.